Hello and welcome to the Emilia Grand Prix pre-race show, Formula One pre-race show for the 2022, Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. My name is Sam Duns. I'll be your host for today's show. And we've got some interesting developments as of right now, basically, as it's happening. As it is pouring down, it is just hissing down massively in Imola right now. It is raining very heavy. The drivers' parade, all the drivers had umbrellas out, obviously, because they wanted to stay dry, which should make for an interesting race, obviously, because last year we had a similar situation where it was raining on race day, which made for an excellent race. There was lots of action. There was a great battle between Verstappen and Hamilton on lap one, sticking their elbows out. There's Hamilton who spun off. There was the George Russell versus Bottas crash between the two, obviously. But I think this race is going to be a little bit different because it was the mention of course, the first thing that I'll talk about is that Will Buxton, obviously F1 journalist, he mentioned about half points based on when the race will finish or if we'll get to finish the whole race. And I'm like, that's worrying me that we're going to get like another Belgium 2021 situation where in that they won't be able to finish the whole race because of how wet it is. And I have a feeling that in an hour's time when the race does start, if it does start at 9 o'clock, it might get delayed again because of because of the rain. We could start at 9:05 or it's 3 o'clock their time, but yeah, 9:05 at least Eastern time for that aspect. So, but before we get too far into the actual race, let's actually just want to talk about my sprint race thoughts. So obviously the sprint race happened yesterday. It was a great race, honestly. It was, it was in the dry. It showed off, the true pace of the cars and stuff like that when we see in the dry around Imola, at least around this circuit, which, I guess would have been a true test of time for today's race, but it's a little bit different now, the fact that it's raining. So we did get a test of that. But I think that the important takeaway really in all this is the fact that, again, we're learning more and more about these 2022 cars. And one thing that I will say is that the cars can follow. The cars can retake some leads because Max Verstappen, obviously, who was in second place, got a bad start, dropped down to second place. Charles Leclerc got up to around about a 2-second gap at the most, and then around 1.9. And then really, realistically, he was able to really push back hard and, get that gap within, I'd say half a second roughly. And then from there, he was able to use DRS. And obviously the Red Bull is super powerful down the straights. Plus DRS is it's a rocket ship. So we saw that with Sergio Perez as well, which I do want to talk about because he had an amazing drive yesterday, going from P7 to P3 to get to the podium to get a crucial 6 points back in the championship in terms of the battle between Mercedes and Red Bull, the battle for second place. Because right now Ferrari's up there, way up top with 116 points. But going back to the sprint race specifically, it's important, to mention obviously the battle versus Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, because that was a great battle. It was further proof that the cars can follow, that they can have these tight battles, these close battles. But also we saw a lot of other teams, a lot of other cars, having battles in the back in the near end. Obviously, we don't get to see that as much because when the two leaders are fighting for the race, they want to have that coverage up in front and center. But I mean, other than that, it was a great race. I think sprint race is the new format. It does work. The new points format works because having, the sprint race where it's just 3 points for first place, 2 points for second place, and then 1 point for third place doesn't really make it important to win. But it's when you can get 8 points, and I know second place gets 7 points, but still, regardless, you can get 8 points and make a difference there. That little 1 point difference, and that those 8 points potentially down the road could mean, could pay huge dividends later on in the season when you're battling for the championship down in Abu Dhabi or maybe in Brazil, wherever it is, wherever you're fighting for the championship near the end. Obviously, Abu Dhabi is the last race of the season if it does come to that. So I think from that aspect, it's great to see. It's a good thing, and especially it makes the weekend interesting because obviously the teams only have 2 free practice sessions, free practice 1, then they have qualifying, and then they have free practice 2, which I always forget about. It's weird, why they wouldn't just restructure it, have FP1, FP2, on Friday, and then have the sprint race or have qualifying on a day or it is what it is. It's just the weekend, the format. But those are my sprint race thoughts. But one thing, and now moving on over to a next thing, which is I already talked about, but a rainy day in Imola and what this means for the race overall. As we can see, obviously, from Friday, from qualifying, that Max Verstappen, had some pace on Friday in the rain in that Red Bull, along with Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. So I think in that aspect, I think that it's important to point out that realistically, going into today's race, Verstappen has the slight advantage over, Ferrari and Charles Leclerc, because he's just a little bit better he's an aggressive driver in the rain as well. That's to point out as well. He's super aggressive. He's able to still find lines that other drivers can't find, or they just don't want to take because they don't want to be aggressive. Again, sometimes that aggressiveness bites him back, bites him back in the ass. But I think that in that aspect, it is an advantage as well. But it's still going to be a great race. It's still going to be super exciting to watch. I just think it would be important to point out as well the fact that Max Verstappen does better in the rain, slight advantage to Red Bull. But again, I think it's a lot more rain coming down than in Friday. So I think potentially teams could be on the wets, and then that could lead to starting the race under the safety car and whatnot and all that. So it should still make for an exciting race as well. Now, the other question, the important thing is to talk about as well, is that can Red Bull even finish the race? Because we've seen before now, Red Bull does great in qualifying. They do great for the first 20 laps of the race. Like in the sprint race, they're able to hold their own because it's 20 laps. But being the fact that obviously the race is over 20 laps, I have to check. Over how many over 20 laps, then Red Bull's reliability comes into question. I know it's a wet race, so obviously maybe the engine won't be running as highly because the cars won't be going as quickly around the track as if it was a dry track, and won't be getting as hot, that kind of thing, as it was in Australia. So weather does play an effect into, Red Bull's reliability, which could be a good thing for them because, ideally they might not have the strongest reliable car, but in the rain, it's not too bad. It's not too tough on the car. They're able to finish the race, able to get some big points and get back in this championship fight. So that's going to be an important thing to look for throughout this race, is whether or not Red Bull can even finish this race, all 50 plus laps of this circuit, of the Autodromo Dino Enzo Ferrari circuit. It's a super long name. It's a super, super long name, and I can never really possibly think of the name. But yeah, looking at the track here. So yeah, 63 laps. 63 laps on the dry can be very tough. Now, obviously, it's raining. It's heavily raining. Cars are going to obviously be affected by that, and cars aren't going to be going as quickly around the circuit as I mentioned. So I think that's an important to point out, what is really going to be the idea here, which again, kind of goes into my next big thing, which would be, potential race strategies. And looking at these potential race strategies, originally I was going to say okay, for the dry, you're going to go for a medium tire to hard, you could clearly see yesterday that the tires, in the sprint race, the soft tires were going about, I'd say 20 laps, but I think they started to fall off maybe around 15, 16, because near the end of that race, Verstappen was starting to catch Leclerc. So I think that, if you don't take care of your tires within those last few laps of that first stint, then potentially you could be in danger for getting caught by another driver that's just behind you, just 2 seconds behind you. Now, it depends on, again, what that lead is in the races. Now, obviously, this is going to be a little bit different because with inter tires and with wet tires, they usually do last pretty long, honestly. It's weird. We've ran a full race with inters, and I don't think they really never get a balding spot because of how much rain's on the track and how much rain is being poured onto the track and how much really affects the tire degradation. But I think that at least for this race, it will most likely be a one-stop race, if not maybe potentially any stops. If they're running a full wet tires, maybe one stop you might get, depending on if the track dries up. Now, again, if the track dries up and rain stops to fall and the track can get dry enough, quick enough, it's going to see maybe similar to a Russia simulation the opposite way, where it was starting with, on a medium on a slick compound, on a dry or slick compound, and then it's going to go to a wet compound near the end of the race, and teams are going to put on inters. Maybe you might have the reverse effect here in Imola, where it's going to start in the wet. Teams are going to start on inters on the wets, and then it's going to switch to a drier track, but eventually, as I've looked at the weather forecast, it's going to continue to rain past the race for the entire 2-hour duration into the evening. So I think in that aspect, I think have a potential where it's going to stick with race strategy, potential 1 to 2 stop strategy. And I think when you look at that, if you are going to say one stop to 0 stop, like a 0 to 1 stop, realistically, if you are going to make that one stop, you have to be very careful when you make it, because if no other team is going to make a pit stop, you've just cost yourself multiple positions in the race. Now, again, they only will pit if the track is getting drier. They feel that they're going to make an aggressive move, maybe put on some slicks, who knows? Or, the tires are going to start to wear, which I think will you never really see during a wet race that teams do pit a lot. They do last a little bit of time. Obviously, the intermediate, the intermediate tires and the wet tires, they probably at least pit once, most likely during the race. I'd say once max. And the next topic I want to really discuss is really the battle between Leclerc and Verstappen. So obviously, so far this season, we haven't had a great battle because of obviously the 2 DNFs that Red Bull has suffered. Now, obviously, Red Bull, if Max Verstappen did not DNF in 2 of those races, it would roughly be about a 9-point gap between Leclerc and Verstappen, which would make for a much more exciting race today. But regardless, Verstappen is still not far out of it. He put in a good amount. Like, that sprint race win was huge. Those extra 8 points that he got to pretty much shift himself in front of Lewis Hamilton, move up in the championship, up to P5 over Hamilton, obviously. And then Sergio Perez as well. Like, looking at the driver standings, he moved up. Right now. So he's just 1 point behind George Russell. Carlos Sainz moved up past George Russell to move him to second place. So now it's a 1-2 Ferrari for the championship lead right now. George Russell in third, Perez fourth, Verstappen fifth, and then Hamilton, Norris, Esteban Ocon. But anyways, the point that I'm getting at here between this Leclerc and Verstappen battle is that I think throughout the season, we will continue to see this battle. And I think that pointing out the fact that, if Verstappen can continue, Red Bull at least can finish races over the next couple of races, and Verstappen continues potentially win these races with Verstappen coming in second place on a hypothetical situation, it would take roughly like Verstappen 7 races. He would have to win 7 races in a row just to get back on this championship battle for this battle. And I think it's important to point out as well is like, I don't think people are like, if Red Bull continues to struggle a little bit and, Verstappen continues not finishing races and it's more of a battle between Leclerc and Sainz in terms of inter-team battle, that's what people should focus on in terms of like pushing, I wouldn't say pushing a narrative, but just in terms of just, having a focus on there, because realistically, you can't push a narrative that like isn't there. Obviously, Netflix loves to do it, but if the battle between Leclerc and Verstappen is not there, then don't push it. There's other battles to be had. There's the George Russell's in P3, Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, who's finished more races than Max Verstappen. He's had a decent campaign so far to start the 2022 year. So there's other narratives that you can push, not push, but just kind of focus on as you're putting out these ideas. And I think that this Leclerc and Verstappen battle being the sole focus isn't really important. I'm not a Verstappen fan, but it's like Verstappen hasn't had a great year. Like, obviously I want him to do better, but like, I don't think like this battle between Leclerc and Verstappen is going to be, potentially what people make it out to be. If Red Bull cannot get the reliability, if Red Bull continue to be reliable, then yeah, it's going to be a great fight for the end of the year, but it's going to take a lot of time for Verstappen, a lot of races and a lot of great performances from him to get back into this championship fight. And I want to say it as a championship fight, but get into this battle with all the other drivers that are fighting very close, like second place right now. In terms of second, third, and fourth, there's only 1 point between each of them, between Carlos Sainz, George Russell, Sergio Perez, and 3 points between teammates and Perez and Verstappen. So second place is wide open, and first place obviously still held by Charles Leclerc, who's 40 points clear of Carlos Sainz. So in that aspect, it's a big gap. But again, don't be pushing this fake narrative that Leclerc and Verstappen right now are having this battle, because right now in this current moment, it is not a battle. Right now, it's Carlos Sainz versus Charles Leclerc for the championship, because it's 1 and 2. It's the top 2 leaders right now, the 2 championship leaders, roughly first and second, going at it. So now with that, let's head over to my race predictions. Obviously, now for me, I think realistically, Max Verstappen for me, I think based on not even just the fact that it's in the rain, but based on his pace in the dry, the fact that he was able to catch Charles Leclerc, win the sprint race after having a not great start. After a slow start, Charles Leclerc finishes second for me. Carlos Sainz Jr. finishes third. Sergio Perez finished fourth, and Lando Norris finishes fifth. I think the order stays roughly the same, but I think that Carlos Sainz will sneak past Sergio Perez. I think realistically, the race pace is a little bit better for Ferrari versus Red Bull. I think the reason why Verstappen takes the lead over Charles Leclerc is just the difference in ability. I think the ability to drive in the rain with Verstappen versus Sergio Perez. I think Verstappen's a little more aggressive. I think his aggressiveness is going to win him this race. And that's my prediction. So And obviously it's like, okay, well, you're a Max fan. Why are you putting him like Max? There's like, well, you know, Charles Leclerc has a great chance to win this race. And I have a feeling that, you know, if Max doesn't get a great start, if Max doesn't have, if he has reliability issues, then yeah, Charles Leclerc is going to win the race. But I also think that right now in this current situation, Verstappen has a very good shot. He was very close on pace with Leclerc. You cannot deny that. In terms of race pace and in qualifying pace. Now, obviously, practice was a little bit different in FP1, FP2, FP3. But regardless, that's his practice. This is qualifying. This is the race. This is the real deal. And I think that Verstappen has the best chance to win this race and will be the race winner for today, at least. Charles Leclerc finishing second. Yeah, Carlos Sainz third. Sergio Perez fourth. And Lando Norris fifth. And with that, I mean, there's really nothing else to discuss here in terms of our pre-race show. Other than that, I think I've covered everything in terms of the potential race strategies, my race predictions. Will Red Bull finish the race, the battle between Leclerc and Verstappen, giving my sprint race thoughts on a rainy day in Imola. And I think as well, the last thing I'll talk about here before I wrap up is looking ahead to this rest of the season. Obviously, we're going to be racing in Miami in 2 weeks, and where the season goes on. You know, where will this title fight go in terms of who, you know, really has the best chances to win this? Obviously, Charles Leclerc right now has shown to be the most dominant so far this season. I think looking at it, you know, he has the best shot to win. He has the most reliable car. He's the fastest car on the grid right now. It's a close second to Red Bull. So Red Bull's a close second to Ferrari in terms of the pace, but again, the reliability isn't there. Mercedes has a reliable car, not the most fastest car, but regardless, it can finish races, it can get points, and that's right now why George Russell's currently only he's P3 in the championship. Obviously, it was a tough day yesterday for him in the sprint race, and it's going to continue to be a tougher day for Mercedes, at least fighting through to get into the points today in the rain is always going to be tough, but I have a feeling that they have a good shot at potentially getting into the points and scoring a few points today to try to stay close with Red Bull, because obviously Red Bull right now, second in the championship right at 69 points, 4 points ahead of Mercedes at 65. And then, so Red Bull's second place, Mercedes third place with 65 points, and Ferrari with 116 points way ahead of the lead right now, which is just massive, a 45-point gap right now in the Constructors' Championship, and obviously a 40-point gap between teammates Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. So I think also I think Carlos Sainz is being like pretty much pushed under the radar because of Verstappen, and that's what I mentioned earlier when I said the Verstappen versus Leclerc battle is like Carlos Sainz is second in the championship right now. He's got 38 points. You know, barring a tough day in Australia, again similar to Verstappen, you know, his season would look a little bit different had he finished in Australia and scored a few more points at least. Finishing, you know, up onto the podium like he did. Like he didn't do, but if he did finish on the podium as well, it would have been that. But unfortunately, it was a tough day for him in Australia, and he couldn't finish, so it was unfortunate. But I think that looking at throughout the season, I think that Leclerc right now is the championship favorite for me over anybody else. He's a clear favorite. He's been dominated this season. I really think that this is the year that he has to win it. Not saying again next year's going to be different, but I think as teams, you know, continue to develop these 2022 cars and continue to build up these, you know, these regulations, and they learn more and more, I think that this year, like Ferrari has gotten right, and I think they continue to do well over these next number of years until the new set of regulations come in. But I think, Leclerc is the championship contender. Verstappen's close with second or third. I think Carlos is up there as well. He's important to look at. He's had a great season. Cannot deter him from fighting away from the title fight. I think it'd be great if we'd have a 3 or 4 driver battle between maybe potentially the 2 Red Bull drivers, 2 Ferrari drivers, maybe one of the Mercedes drivers in George Russell or Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, also, speaking of that, Lewis Hamilton recently came out and said the fact that he will not be fighting for this 8th championship. He said on Instagram, it was on Twitter, it was released that he is giving up on this championship. It says, well, not really. They're essentially giving up. He said they will not be competing for this championship. That's what he said, at least. So I think in that aspect, I think that realistically, it's important to point out that, I wouldn't say I'm going to believe that the fact that he's giving up, because he's not going to give up, obviously. Realistically, Yeah, he's pushing. I think he's pushing. He's just saying like, hey, listen, fans. If we don't win, we're giving the heads up. If we don't win, we don't want to like disappoint you into the season. Giving you the pre-disappointment warning. But if they do win or do have some success, finishing near the top, it'll be crucial. It'll be important. They'll be happy. They'll be happy for them. But I think realistically on a different level, I think that I don't believe it one bit. So I don't think it one. I don't believe it one bit. I don't think he means by this. When he says that he's going, they're giving up on this championship. They're like his 8th championship title because of how bad the Mercedes is. Obviously, there's still lots of time left. There are tons of upgrades that Mercedes can make throughout the season. I'm sure they have the money for it. They have the budget for it to make these new upgrades. So in that aspect, it's like, why are you discounting? Why you're selling yourself short? Like, is he gonna pull the reverse psychology move where he's gonna be like, oh yeah, I know we're not gonna win, and then you're like halfway through the season, they're fighting, they're giving up, and they're making a big push, their big second half season push, because again, like I said, there's 22 races on the calendar. This is only race 4 of 22. There's 18 rounds left, and even when you go up to the summer break, roughly, you got still 8 to 10 rounds left after the summer break. So when you look at that, there's DNFs, there's other race finishes, there's not scoring in the points for the other teams. I'm not saying Mercedes is going to like come up with a massive upgrade and just shock the crowd and like they've been hiding it this whole time and that's going to be their ultimate stellar move, because I don't think that would be like really, I wouldn't say that to be legal, but it's like you have to obviously, now what's interesting as well about this whole upgrade thing is that obviously a lot of the upgrades have to be made public in time for everyone to know about, obviously to see these new technical upgrades. So obviously if they come up with a new technical upgrade, it has to be shown, and then teams can counteract it. Like they can't just one day show up at the racetrack and be like, hey, we have this secret new thing that's going to make our car super, super fast, and we're going to start dominating now, like we did for the past like 7-8 years. I don't think they're going to do that. But I think that they can make small adjustments each weekend and bring these, upgrades to each race to further improve the car. And then with that, they have a chance to get back in this title fight, because I would count out Lewis Hamilton or anyone in that aspect as well. What is going to happen. So, but with that pretty much sums up our pre-race show for today. Stay tuned for Tuesday. We'll be posting our post-race podcast. We'll be talking about Talladega, the NASCAR race. We'll be talking about the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix and other motorsports as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the intermissionsports.com for more content. And happy Sunday.